right, so we are going to get started. We're going to start with PLT Prep. All right, so I am Dr. Haj-Broussard, and I am at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, and this is the PLT Prep. You want to go online for whatever Praxis test you take and find their test at a glance. They have just little summaries of what's on the tests globally, and then also how the test is formatted. You always want to know how your test is formatted, how long it takes, so 2 hours, and about the number of questions. Now these change, so make sure you get it for your particular test. This one currently says 70 selected and 4 constructed response for the PLT Case 6. A quarter of the questions are going to be the constructed response, that is looking at, in most particularly students as learners and in the instructional process, but also a little bit assessment, professional development. Likewise, students as learners and instructional process are given more weight in the multiple choice questions, and then assessment and professional development leadership are given a little bit less. You'll see it's the same exact thing for the 7 to 12, but again, check your test before you take it. Some test taking tips are you need to know the format of the test, just like we saw. You need to stay calm and pace yourself. So if it's 2 hours with no breaks, you need to know this. The 3 most important things I would say are take the easy test first. So you don't want to get stuck at number 2 when you have 10 other questions that you knew at the end of the test that you could have easily done in the same time it took you to guess at number 2. So if you don't know it right away, then mark that answer as unknown and move on to other questions that you might know. Then you want to look at those questions that you marked and do your process of elimination. That's POE. So your process of elimination will help you narrow down your choices. Then you want to choose a letter of the day. All right, so if you don't know it at all, you didn't do the easy test, you can't do process of elimination, choose a letter before you step foot into that testing center that you're going to use whenever either of those other 2 strategies fail. That's your letter of the day. It could be C, it could be B, it could be D. Don't change it. Keep the letter of the day. And finally, the big testing tip is that you need to answer the constructed response questions. A lot of times people start writing and then they go off on tangents and they don't go back to answer. So you want to organize your constructed response and divide it into the different levels of questions that it has and respond to each of those areas. So you can make sure that you are actually responding to the constructed response. On test day, you want to check your registration ticket, all of the stuff. I'll actually just leave it here a second so you can read this. I'm not going to go over it, but just make sure that you are prepared, that you're going to be comfortable and not harried. This is again looking at the test at a glance. So I will keep this for a second. You can pause to look at it if you'd like. And then the outline, which we already looked at, you'll notice that since I've done this, those numbers have changed. So make sure that you look at those numbers in terms of the percentages of what's being given. This, again, I will leave for you to hold and pause on if you need to in terms of understanding computer-delivered questions. I think most of you have taken tests online with Praxis already and the computer-delivered ones, but if not, pause and look through these because you really want to be familiar with what are your choices in terms of what you can do on the computer. So, you want to, before you begin studying, take a pretest. So this says we will grade together, but since I'm not actually there, I can't do that. So you want to take a pretest that has the answer so that you can see where your areas of weakness are. You want to focus on your weakness. As I always say, errors are arrows. They point to where you need to work or where your students need to work. You also want to use some memory strategies. You will see throughout this presentation that I use a lot of stories in order to get ideas across. So you want to also, that will help you remember things. Mnemonic devices will help you remember things as well. Sometimes like silly sentences where the first letters are stand for something, those usually work well. And then the memory castle is the one where also we're going to focus on, especially for students as learners. So I'll talk about that throughout the student as learner process, which is what we're going to focus on for this particular training. And then mind maps. Mind maps are just graphic organizers that help you link things together. So let's look at a little video about memory castles.
How to improve your memory with the Memory Palace technique. Memory can fade with age. Stay sharp by using the Memory Palace technique to recall information. You will need a familiar place and a vivid visual imagination. Step 1. Select a place with many rooms that you can vividly picture in your mind's eye, such as your home or workplace. Step 2. Chart a specific route through every nook and cranny of your palace. Always start in the same place, follow the same path, and end in the same place. Step 3. Create a system for traveling through each room, such as always going from left to right. Note all of the features of each room, such as a desk, lamp, trash bin, dresser, and a painting. See each item as a memory slot where you can store information. Step 4. Associate objects or ideas you want to remember with features in your memory palace. Locate them on your route in the order that you want to remember them. Exaggerate images to aid in the recall process. For instance, imagine tons of huge apples dangling from one of your houseplants to remind yourself to buy apples. Step 5. Start at the beginning of your route and visit each feature in turn to readily recall the information you have stored. Soon, people will comment on your excellent memory. Did you know, memory recall dramatically drops within the first 20 minutes of learning something?
All right. So that's what we're going to use as a memory castle to help us with learning students as learners. So let's go ahead and get started with students as learners.
Hey guys, this is Ron White from the National Geographic show Brain Games or the History Channel show Stan Lee's Superhumans. Have you ever wondered what the Sherlock Holmes Mind Palace is? Have you ever heard of a Mind Palace? Well, I'm going to show you what it is and how to use it to memorize anything freakishly fast. It is a crazy cool skill. Check this out.
All right, well, we don't need to do that one. That one's going to take too long anyway. All right, back to the training. Hopefully I'll be able to cut that out. We're going to go back and we're going to look at students as learners. So students as learners is looking at student development, it's looking at the learning process, it's looking at students as diverse learners, their motivation and their learning environment. So the first person we're going to learn about is Maslow. So Maslow worked with monkeys, and he saw when he worked with monkeys that some needs took precedence over others. So for example, if the monkeys were both hungry and thirsty and he put food and water in front of them, they would go first for the water, because you die of thirst in days where you only die of hunger in weeks. So that need was stronger. And so he took this idea of we have needs that are stronger that take precedence, and he created what is now his famous hierarchy of needs. So you have the initial needs, the air, water, food, and sex. Those are the physiological needs. He found that there were actually 5 broad layers of needs. So you had the physiological needs, safety and security, love and belonging, esteem, and then the need to actualize yourself. So the numbers 1 through 4 are the deficit needs, what he calls D needs. In other words, you have to make sure that one of them is met before people will put energy into the other. So if you're hungry and thirsty, thirst is more needed than hunger. They will look for water first before they'll look for food. So, but if you get all of that need, if they drink the water, then they'll concentrate on the food. So in other words, they cease to be motivating once the needs have been met. Number 5 is a little bit different. It is a being need. The idea is a self-actualization, to be all that you can be. And the reason that this is important in education is because that self-actualization here at the top of your, moved it back, here at the top of the pyramid is actually where education occurs. So all of these other things get in the way and draw away energy from education. So if they're hungry, they're going to have a hard time. If they're being bullied and their safety need is not being met, they're going to have a hard time learning. If they're being rejected by their peers, they're going to have a hard time learning. And if they don't feel like they can accomplish anything, if they don't have self-efficacy and their esteem's not being met, then they're going to have a harder time learning. So this is one of the reasons that Maslow is really important. As we go through and talk about these, you really want to think about if you've selected, let's say you've done your memory castle and you selected, say, your grandmother's home. So because I think of Maslow as steps, I often like to put Maslow on the front steps. So you might want to think putting a monkey with water and food on the front steps of your memory castle so that you can remember Maslow. And then just put Maslow's name. All right, so that is Maslow's hierarchy. The next